What is going on, New York Giants fans? Welcome to another video from Hit Squad Productions. And in this video, I want to look at the New York Giants 2020 draft class, look at these players, give some grades, and give my overall thoughts onto how I thought our rookies did. Now, let's be honest. I think that we had a solid 2020 draft class. You can make a very good argument that the Giants did a disservice for not addressing the wide receiver position in this draft and heavy relying on players like Darius Slayton and Sterling Shepard to step up to be that number one player and rely on these undrafted wide receivers like Benjamin Victor, Austin Mack. You guys know how that goes. So you can make a solid argument that the Giants absolutely did a disservice to this offense and Daniel Jones by not addressing that position. At the same time, I don't think that any Giants fans can complain about the productivity for most of the players that we drafted, especially the later round picks. Now, looking at Andrew Thomas, tackle out of Georgia, let's be honest. Andrew Thomas, for the rest of his career, will be compared to Mekhi Becton, Jedrick Wills, and Tristan Wirfs. And you can make a solid argument that those three tackles had a better year than Andrew Thomas. You guys remember that under Mark Colombo, this offensive line was not looking good, and Andrew Thomas was looking like a bust. And it was very concerning considering the fact that we've had tackles in the past that really have not worked out for us. You look at players like, Eric Flowers, who obviously the Giants put him at the wrong position to where he was supposed to be at, but I don't think you can really compare Andrew Thomas at this point, at least, to Eric Flowers. Andrew Thomas down the stretch, once Joe Judge started taking care of the offensive line and addressing it, they fired Mark Colombo. Andrew Thomas started looking like the left tackle that we drafted fourth overall. I'm very pleased with the progress that Andrew Thomas has shown. I think that he could be our solid left tackle going in the year. For many years going forward. Now, looking at Pro Football Reference, they stated that he played 977 snaps, which was 27th in the league. He had 3 penalties, which was tied for 39th in the league, and he allowed 10 sacks, which was first in the league. Obviously, that's not looking good for Andrew Thomas, but I don't think that he's going to have that kind of season going into his sophomore year. You could definitely look at most of those sacks came in the first half of the season where, again, we were under Mark Colombo. This offensive line was not good. And you saw going down the stretch that Andrew Thomas looked very solid. Andrew Thomas was coming to form. There was games where he wasn't giving up a pressure. There was games when you look at Washington, who a lot of people were saying they had the best defensive line in the league, where, they're not getting any sacks on Daniel Jones. They're not even putting pressure on Daniel Jones. And when you look at that game, Andrew Thomas had a solid game. He looked good down the stretch. I'm very excited to see what Andrew Thomas does going into next year. Now, with the second round, we ended up picking safety Xavier McKinney out of Alabama. Now, look, Xavier McKinney was my favorite pick in this whole draft. I know a lot of Giants fans, including myself, wanted to go get them an Isaiah Simmons, considering the fact that he could do it all. He could play multiple positions. And when we didn't get him, it was kind of like, okay, what are we going to do now? We need an edge rush. We need a player that can do multiple positions. So we went out in the second round and we get Xavier McKinney. Now, a lot of Giants fans, when we signed Xavier McKinney, was like, all right, we couldn't get Isaiah Simmons, but we got this guy. And you saw on film that this guy, Xavier McKinney, could do almost everything that Isaiah Simmons can do. They're not the same, but they could do almost everything similar. And Xavier McKinney, you can make an argument, was the best safety in this draft going into this season. Obviously, Winfield Jr. had a very good year, but he also got to play more than Xavier McKinney, considering the fact that Xavier McKinney had an ankle injury before the season started. Or it was a foot injury, excuse me. Now, he did have 14 solo tackles. He had that one interception against Dallas, which was clutch. And, you got to give a lot of credit to Patrick Graham and how he's been able to use this 3-safety set. A lot of people were questioning how is this going to work, considering the fact that we'll have 3, if not possibly 4 safeties on the field when you consider Julian Love. But I thought, with the packages that Patrick Graham was drawing up to include Xavier McKinney, he could be that guy going forward. I think that he's proven that, he's still learning the playbook. He's still a young guy. He's going to get more adjusted into the NFL going into his second season. Remember, he didn't play all 16 games this year. So there's a lot of promise with Xavier McKinney. We did re-sign Logan Ryan, so we're going to see how he fits going into next year. But I wouldn't be surprised again if Patrick Graham runs another 3-package set. Now, in the third round, we ended up drafting offensive tackle Matt Peart out of UConn. Matt Peart, I know a lot of Giants fans were saying that, we should have took out Cam Fleming and just started Matt Peart. And I completely understand that argument. You want to get the most out of your players and get them more playing time as they go into their sophomore year if you're not thinking that that player that they're replacing is going to be part of the long-term future. And Matt Peart, I thought there was times where he looked solid. I thought there was times where he looked very shaky. And look, I completely get it. When you consider the fact that, Matt Peart really, you can make an argument was a steal in the draft. Honestly, when you look at it, he was a steal in the draft. And he was one of the players on this roster, to me, that screamed they had the most potential. Matt Peart, he's a lengthy guy. He has some length to him. I know I just stated that. But, one thing I like about Matt Peart is that he has some good off the ball strength. And I think that on the right side of the ball, if we could solidify the left side, which we don't know what's going to happen with Will Hernandez, but if we could solidify the right side of the ball, I think that that would only help this offensive line, considering the fact that we don't know what's going to also happen with Kevin Seidler. We don't know if we're going to cut him. We don't know if we're going to put Will Hernandez on the right side. You're hearing that Will Hernandez may not even return this season. So we're hoping that players like Matt Peart can really step up going into next season. Now, he did play 150 snaps, which was 97th in the league. He had 0 penalties. He had 2 sacks allowed, which was tied for 51st in the league. So, he played decent in the limited action that he was given, but I think, there's optimism with players like Matt Peart, and hopefully he could be that guy going forward. Now, we also drafted Darnay Holmes, cornerback out of UCLA. To me, Darnay Holmes was the best signing, in my honest opinion, in this whole draft. Xavier McKinney was my favorite, but Darnay Holmes was the best signing. Darnay Holmes really solidified himself as a slot cornerback. I know a lot of people were kind of worried about his size. He's only 5'10". He's 195 pounds. And we've had issues in the slot. We haven't had a solid slot corner in quite some time. And this rookie really stepped up. This rookie really came in, handled his business week in and week out. I know he was dealing with an injury towards the later half of the season, and you saw Xavier McKinney playing in the slot more. But Darnay Holmes really held his own. He had 23 solo tackles, 1 interception, which was in the Seattle game, and he had 5 passes defended. Darnay Holmes is looking like a solid slot corner. I give a lot of credit for Joe Judge and Patrick Graham and how they've been able to use Darnay Holmes. The slot cornerback position is not an easy position to play at all, let alone the cornerback position. It's one of the hardest positions to learn in the NFL. So when you have a rookie come in and play one of the hardest positions and excel in that, I got to give a lot of credit to this rookie. Darnay Holmes looks very promising, and I think that, again, he was the steal of this draft. Now we go again and sign Shane Lemieux, guard out of Oregon. Shane Lemieux was an interesting prospect because, we did something that a lot of people were very concerned about that you saw in the outside media, and that was we were rotating offensive linemen. We saw Shane Lemieux sometimes play fullback. We saw him play guard. He was kind of, the Swiss Army knife. He could do multiple things, and Shane Lemieux brought something to this offensive line that we saw in Will Hernandez, but I think that Shane Lemieux is just a little bit more polished. I know that's an argument that some people don't agree with, but Shane Lemieux brought a grittiness. He brought an aggression that, Will Hernandez, that's kind of bitten him in the ass a little bit. There's been times where Will Hernandez has been called for flags due to being a little bit aggressive. You look at some Cowboys games that he's played, but Shane Lemieux really stepped in and I thought played very good at the guard position. He had 504 snaps, which was 68th in the league. He had 3 penalties, which was tied for 32nd in the league, and he allowed 5 sacks. That's going to happen. He is a rookie. Same with Matt Peart, same with Andrew Thomas. They're going to learn. They're going to grow. And I thought what was very good was that Joe Judge and Jason Garrett were able to, get these rookies established and get these rookies some playing time so that going into their sophomore season, they can have that experience. They didn't have a training camp. They didn't have a preseason. So you want to get your players as much playing time as they can, especially if they're rookies. Now, again, we don't know what's going to happen with Will Hernandez. You're hearing that he may not come back. I thought with Shane Lemieux playing on the left side, I thought the left side looked solid. You look at that long break that Wayne Gallman had that came from the left side. Shane Lemieux, he could be our left guard going forward. He could be our right guard. Prior to him taking the left guard position from Juan Hernandez, I personally assumed that when we released Kevin Zeitler going into the 2021 season, that Shane Lemieux would play the right guard position, but we don't know exactly what's going to happen. I think that Shane Lemieux is a solid pick. He brings a nice grittiness to this offensive line. It seems like the run game seems to be a lot better when he's in the lineup. He's a little bit suspect when it comes to the passing game, but I think that's something that could be corrected and fixed over time. Now, we went and drafted Cam Brown out of Penn State. There was familiarity between him and Sean Spence, our defensive line coach. Cam Brown, look, Cam Brown was one of those players to me that I thought he's not going to come in and be, your multiple sack guy. He's not like that at all. There's a reason why he fell in the draft the way that he did, but it's a nice depth piece. And at a worst, he could be on special teams, but, he had 8 solo tackles. He had 1 forced fumble, but outside of that, Cam Brown really didn't do too much for us. There was games where, you saw little spurts, but at the end of the day, when, you had players like Ocean Jimenez that are going out, you had players like Marcus Golden getting traded, Kyle Fackrell being on IR, you would think like a player like Cam Brown would really step up to that plate, and unfortunately he didn't. But I think that's more of a test to the kind of player that we're getting from Cam Brown, which isn't really a knock on him. Again, I do think that it's a solid depth piece, but overall, not too really upset with the Cam Brown pick. Now, this to me was a very interesting pick. And I know a lot of Giants fans, when we signed him in the draft, were saying that, this was a steal. I wanted to do more research on him, but as the season went along, you saw that there was potential with this player, and he's looking pretty solid for us. And that is linebacker out of Minnesota, Carter Coughlin. Look, Carter Coughlin, I was not expecting any of our late round picks to do much going into this year, considering the fact that most 6th, 5th, even, 4th round picks sometimes, especially the 7th round picks, they don't really make the roster, let alone do much. It happens. The NFL is it can be a confusing business with, you could have players that get drafted in the 2nd round and next year they get cut. It's just how the dice roll. And Carter Coughlin really stepped up, in my honest opinion, and really solidified himself as a solid late round pick, considering the fact that, look, Minnesota quietly had a good season, and Carter Coughlin quietly had a good season in Minnesota defensively. And I thought that he had a good season with the New York Giants, considering the fact that he was thrown into a position where at a point, we didn't have no edge rushers. We didn't have any linebackers that could come off the ball and really get to the quarterback. And Carter Coughlin did that. You saw that in the Seattle game. And you saw in multiple games, you could look at the Tampa game where he really stood out on the field. He really did what he had to do, and he proved that, he could be a solid depth piece going forward. Do I think that he could be that number 1 guy on the field? Unfortunately, I don't, but I do think that he could be a solid depth piece, maybe a nice rotation piece. He had 13 solo tackles, 1 sack. He didn't have any forced fumbles or interceptions, but I think that Carter Coughlin is one of those players that he may not jump out on the stat sheet, but he'll show his presence on the field. He'll show it when you look at the tape. But again, I'm not going to put too much high expectations on our late round picks. I thought they exceeded our expectations already. So, I don't want to raise my expectations too high. And then next year, they don't really do too much. And then we're having the argument, well, these are late round picks. They're not supposed to do much. So I like what I saw from our late round picks, especially Carter Coughlin, but I'm just not going to have too much expectations for them going forward. Now, we went and got TJ Brunson. TJ Brunson really hasn't done anything for us. I'm not going to really get into that. But yeah, we'll see what happens with that. Chris Williamson, he's not even on the team anymore. He's with the Atlanta Falcons. So another player that really hasn't done anything for the New York Giants. Lastly, we have Mr. Irrelevant, to who the Giants, who they see him as, is Mr. Relevant. Tate Crowder, he really came in, and I think that this was something that the Giants really hit the nail on. I think they found a solid linebacker that they could pair temporarily with Blake Martinez until they draft better at that position. But Tate Crowder did fairly solid for us this year, considering the fact most Mr. Irrelevant picks don't even see the field. So the fact that he was able to see the field, get a lot while being on the field, and do a lot while he was on the field really speaks a lot. He had that game-winning touchdown against Washington. He's had 1 sack, 34 solo tackles. Tate Crowder is a solid solid piece. If not a solid starter, he's a solid rotational piece. Came out of Georgia. Obviously, we drafted two Georgia Bulldogs, and one thing I will say about Tate Crowder is that he has some nice speed to him. I'm not going to say he's a sideline to sideline linebacker, but he has some speed to him that really shows up on tape and it shows on the field. Now, I think one thing he has to improve in is his coverage skills, but I do think that he will get better at that over time. I got to give a lot of credit to Patrick Graham because Patrick Graham was able to get the most out of his late round picks, especially when you look at Carter Coughlin, Tate Crowder, Darnay Holmes. You can make an argument as well, Cam Brown. I thought that he could have gotten more out of Cam Brown, but again, that's also the same. That's the kind of player you're going to get with Cam Brown. He's not going to really come out and do too much. He didn't do too much at Penn State, which is why he was a late round pick. But when you look at players like Tate Crowder, Carter Coughlin, Darnay Holmes, you really can't be upset with the productivity that Patrick Graham got from him. Obviously, XAVIER McKinney, but we drafted him in the second round, and you expect your second round picks to come and play. So I got to give a lot of credit to Joe Judge and how he drafted. I thought this was the best draft that we've had in quite some time. Hopefully, going forward, these draft picks can take that step forward because when you look at the previous drafts, like in 2018 and 2019, some of those draft players, they had a good year, and then going into their sophomore year or going into their third year, it was it was shaky. It was shaky. And I know I just said third year. I'm thinking of 2017, but I'm gonna say for the last 2 years. Where Hernandez really hasn't been too good since we drafted him, and that's unfortunate because I think Will Hernandez could be a solid player for us, but it hasn't really worked out. And Saquon's always been injured, and hopefully we can have him back healthy for a full season. We're gonna have to wait and see what happens. Overall, I'm gonna give these players as a whole, I'm gonna give this draft a solid B plus. I know I want to give it an A. I'm not going to be able to give it an A, but I'm going to give it a solid B plus overall for this draft. I'm very pleased with the talent and the level of productivity that we were able to get out of the talent of which we drafted. I'm very excited to see the players that we draft this year. I think we're aware of the key positions that we need to draft, such as wide position, linebacker, and cornerback. That's something that we have to address. And if this team can address that properly, you're looking at a very competitive team going forward. There wasn't a lot of high expectations for the Giants in 2020, and I think that we quietly exceeded expectations in 2020. I think that now Joe Judge has brought something that we haven't had in quite some time to the New York Giants. And not only is that a culture, but he's brought hope. We have to be honest with ourselves. I think that Joe Judge and his staff has brought hope to the New York Giants that this team can be very competitive going forward. Obviously, I'm not expecting, our division to be as poor as it was this year going into next year, especially with Dak Prescott possibly coming back or Washington looking to draft another quarterback and the Eagles getting a new head coach. We don't know how this division is going to be next year, but I do expect for the New York Giants to be competitive. I hope that they can draft as well as they did going into this year. So let me know your thoughts below. How are you guys feeling about these draft picks? What is your grade on the overall draft? Again, I'm going to give it a B plus. Hopefully next year I can say that we have an A on this draft. But let me know your thoughts below. If you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. Leave a like below. Follow us on Twitter if you haven't. The link will be in the description, and we'll see you guys in the next video. What is going on, New York Giants fans? Welcome to another video from Hit Squad Productions. And in this video, I want to look at the New York Giants 2020 draft class, look at these players, give some grades, and give my overall thoughts on